Welcome back to another deep dive into history, where tonight we're embarking on an extraordinary journey across the vast golden sands of Arabia. Picture this: endless dunes stretching beyond the horizon, ancient trade routes carved by countless caravans, and kingdoms that rose and fell like mirages in the desert heat. This is the story of the Arabian Peninsula, a land that would ultimately reshape the entire world. Tonight, you'll witness the birth of civilizations in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. You'll walk alongside Bedouin tribes as they master the art of desert survival, stand in the bustling markets of Mecca as merchants from 3 continents haggle over precious goods, and watch as a single revelation in a cave near Mecca transforms not just Arabia, but the entire course of human history. From the mysterious Nabataeans, who carved an empire from stone and Petra, to the rise of Islam that would create one of history's largest empires, we're about to explore how desert kingdoms became the bridge between East and West, how trade routes became pathways for ideas, and how a peninsula dismissed by many as barren wasteland became the birthplace of a faith followed by nearly 2 billion people today. How did nomadic tribes unite under a single banner? What made these desert kingdoms so powerful that they challenged the greatest empires of their time? And why do events that happened in this desert over 1,000 years ago still shape our world today? Let's find out together. Chapter 1. Pre-500 BCE. The story begins long before recorded history, when the Arabian Peninsula was not the arid desert we know today. Imagine stepping back 10,000 years, when this land was green and fertile, crossed by rivers and dotted with lakes. Archaeological evidence reveals that early humans thrived here, developing some of humanity's first settlements. But as the climate gradually shifted, transforming lush grasslands into harsh desert, only the most adaptable survived. The ancestors of the Arab peoples were forced to become masters of adaptation. They learned to read the stars for navigation, to find water in the most unlikely places, and to survive on the sparse resources the desert provided. These weren't just survival skills. They were the foundations of what would become a sophisticated civilization perfectly adapted to one of Earth's most challenging environments. By 3000 BCE, distinct cultures had emerged across the peninsula. In the south, the fertile highlands of Yemen gave birth to advanced kingdoms that would control the lucrative incense trade. The Sabaeans, whom you might know from the biblical Queen of Sheba, established elaborate irrigation systems that turned desert valleys into agricultural paradises. Their engineering prowess rivaled that of ancient Rome, with dams and aqueducts that sustained large populations in seemingly impossible locations. Meanwhile, in the north, the Nabataeans were carving an empire from the red sandstone cliffs of what is now Jordan and Saudi Arabia. These were primitive desert dwellers. They were sophisticated traders who understood that controlling water meant controlling power. They developed techniques for collecting and storing rainwater that allowed them to establish cities in the heart of the desert. Their capital, Petra, became one of the wonders of the ancient world, a rose-red city literally carved from living rock. The Nabataeans controlled the incense route, the ancient world's equivalent of oil pipelines. Frankincense and myrrh, aromatic resins from trees that grew only in southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa, were literally worth their weight in gold. Roman emperors burned these precious substances in their temples. Egyptian pharaohs used them in mummification, and wealthy families across the Mediterranean demanded them for religious ceremonies and luxury items. But controlling this trade required more than just military might. The Nabataeans developed a complex system of treaties, alliances, and protection services. They offered safe passage, fresh water, and secure storage to merchant caravans crossing their territory. In return, they collected taxes and tribute that funded their remarkable civilization. They became the Federal Express of the ancient world, guaranteeing that valuable cargo would reach its destination safely and on time. The desert itself became their greatest ally. While empires rose and fell around them, the Nabataeans thrived because they understood something their enemies didn't. In the desert, water is more valuable than armies. They could retreat into seemingly barren wastelands where pursuing armies would die of thirst, while they survived using hidden water caches and secret oases known only to them. Other kingdoms across Arabia followed similar patterns. The Himyarites in Yemen built terraced mountains that captured every drop of precious rainfall. The people of Dilmun, in what is now Bahrain, became master pearl divers and sea traders, connecting Arabia to the civilizations of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Each group developed unique adaptations to their environment, but all shared a common understanding. In Arabia, survival required cooperation, innovation, and an intimate knowledge of the land. These early Arabian kingdoms also developed sophisticated systems of tribal confederation. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Arabian society was built on complex networks of kinship, alliance, and mutual obligation. Tribal leaders, known as sheikhs, ruled through consensus and personal charisma rather than divine mandate. This would prove crucial in later centuries, as it created a flexible social structure that could adapt quickly to changing circumstances. The foundations were being laid for something unprecedented in human history, a civilization that would not only survive in the world's harshest environments, but would eventually explode outward to conquer and transform the ancient world. But first, these scattered tribes and kingdoms would need to learn the most valuable lesson of all: unity. Chapter 2, 500 BCE to 300 CE. As we move into the classical period, the Arabian Peninsula transforms into the beating heart of global commerce. Picture caravans stretching for miles across the desert, loaded with treasures from India, silk from China, spices from Southeast Asia, and gold from Africa. This isn't just trade. This is the ancient world's internet, connecting civilizations that might never have known of each other's existence. The Nabataeans have reached the height of their power, and their influence extends far beyond their desert strongholds. They've established trading posts from Damascus to Gaza, creating a commercial network that rivals anything the Roman Empire has built. But they face a challenge. Rome itself is expanding eastward, hungry for the wealth that flows through Arabian trade routes. In 25 BCE, Roman Emperor Augustus orders Aelius Gallus to lead an invasion force into Arabia. The Romans call it Arabia Felix, Happy Arabia, believing it to be filled with gold and spices ripe for conquest. What they discover instead is that the Arabs have turned the desert itself into an unconquerable fortress. The Roman legions, accustomed to fighting in the organized battles of Europe, find themselves completely unprepared for desert warfare. The Arabian defenders don't meet the Romans in pitched battle. Instead, they employ tactics that would be familiar to modern guerrilla fighters. They strike at supply lines, poison water sources, and disappear into the vast desert whenever the Romans attempt to retaliate. The environment itself becomes their weapon. Romans die not from arrows or swords, but from heat exhaustion, dehydration, and diseases they've never encountered. The campaign is a complete disaster for Rome. After months of frustration and massive casualties, the survivors limp back to Egypt, having learned a hard lesson. The desert kingdoms cannot be conquered by conventional means. This failure teaches Rome something crucial. It is better to trade with the Arabs than to fight them. This victory establishes Arabia's unique position in the ancient world. Unlike every other region, Arabia maintains its independence not through military might alone, but through strategic use of geography and the economic leverage that comes from controlling trade routes. The Arabs become the Switzerland of the ancient world, neutral, prosperous, and essential to everyone's economic interests. Meanwhile, in southern Arabia, the kingdom of Saba is experiencing its own golden age. The Sabaeans have mastered the art of hydraulic engineering, building the Great Dam of Marib, one of the engineering marvels of the ancient world. This massive structure, over 2,000 feet long and 50 feet high, controls the flow of seasonal floods and creates an oasis that supports a population of over 300,000 people. The wealth of Saba comes not just from the incense trade, but from their monopoly on the sea routes connecting the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Sabaean merchants sail sophisticated vessels called safinas across the Arabian Sea, bringing back pepper from India, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, and precious stones from Southeast Asia. Their ports buzz with activity as merchants speaking dozens of languages negotiate deals that will be completed thousands of miles away. But the Sabaeans understand something that many later civilizations will forget. True wealth comes not from hoarding resources, but from facilitating their movement. They develop sophisticated banking systems, standardized weights and measures, and commercial law codes that enable complex international transactions. A merchant in Damascus can write a letter of credit that will be honored in ports along the Indian Ocean, a financial innovation that won't be matched in Europe for another 1,000 years. The cultural exchange flowing through these trade routes is as valuable as the material goods. Arabian merchants don't just carry spices and silk, they carry ideas, technologies, and innovations. Mathematical concepts from India, astronomical knowledge from Persia, and philosophical ideas from Greece all flow through Arabian trading centers, where they're combined and refined before continuing their journey to new destinations. This period also sees the development of a uniquely Arabian form of literature and culture. The long desert journeys between trading centers create perfect conditions for the development of oral poetry and storytelling. Arabian poets develop sophisticated verse forms that can be memorized and transmitted across vast distances. These aren't just entertainment. They're a form of cultural DNA that preserves history, law, and social values across generations. The Arabic language itself evolves during this period into a sophisticated medium for commerce and diplomacy. Unlike the local dialects spoken by individual tribes, Classical Arabic becomes the lingua franca of desert trade, allowing merchants from different regions to communicate effectively. This linguistic unity will prove crucial in later centuries, providing the foundation for rapid cultural and religious expansion. As this golden age of trade reaches its peak, the various Arabian kingdoms find themselves wealthier and more powerful than ever before. But they also face new challenges. The Romans are learning to bypass Arabian trade routes by sailing directly to India. New powers are rising in Persia and Byzantium. And perhaps most significantly, social tensions are building within Arabian society itself as the gap between wealthy merchants and poor Bedouins continues to widen. The stage is being set for dramatic changes that will transform not just Arabia, but the entire world. Chapter 3, 570 to 632 CE in the bustling trading city of Mecca. Around the year 570 CE, a child is born who will change the course of human history. His name is Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and he enters a world where the old certainties of Arabian life are beginning to crumble. The great trade kingdoms are facing pressure from new competitors. Traditional tribal bonds are weakening under the influence of wealth and urbanization, and many Arabs are questioning the old gods, who seem unable to provide answers for rapidly changing times. Mecca itself embodies these contradictions. It's the wealthiest city in Arabia, built around the Kaaba, a black stone cube that has been a pilgrimage site for Arab tribes since time immemorial. But this prosperity has come at a cost. The egalitarian traditions of desert life have given way to stark inequality. Wealthy merchant families dominate politics and religion, while the poor survive on their charity. Slavery is common. Women have few rights, and tribal warfare continues to claim lives despite the supposed sanctity of the city. Muhammad grows up in this environment as an orphan, raised first by his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, then by his uncle Abu Talib. Despite his modest circumstances, he develops a reputation for honesty and integrity that earns him the nickname Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. He works as a trader, eventually managing caravans for a wealthy widow named Khadija, whom he later marries. This gives him intimate knowledge of Arabian society at every level, from the boardrooms of Meccan merchants to the campfires of Bedouin guides. But Muhammad is troubled by what he sees. The traditional Arabian values of hospitality, generosity, and tribal solidarity are being eroded by the pursuit of wealth. The weak are exploited, the poor are ignored, and the powerful seem to care more about profit than justice. He begins spending time in meditation, often retreating to a cave called Hira in the mountains outside Mecca. In 610 CE, during one of these retreats, Muhammad experiences something that will transform his life and ultimately reshape the world. According to Islamic tradition, the angel Gabriel appears to him with a divine revelation. The first word of this revelation is Iqra, read. But Muhammad, like most Arabs of his time, is illiterate. When he protests that he cannot read, the angel embraces him and the words flow directly into his consciousness. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of blood. Read, and your Lord is most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. This is the beginning of the Quran, which Muslims believe is the direct word of God revealed through Muhammad over the next 23 years. But these aren't just religious teachings. They read a comprehensive program for social reform that addresses every problem Muhammad has observed in Arabian society. The early revelations focus on social justice and moral reform. They condemn the worship of wealth, demand care for orphans and widows, and call for an end to the exploitation of the poor. They proclaim the radical idea that all humans are equal before God, regardless of tribe, wealth, or social status. In a society built on rigid hierarchies and tribal loyalties, this message is revolutionary. Muhammad begins sharing these revelations with a small circle of family and friends. His wife Khadija becomes the first convert, followed by his young cousin Ali and his trusted friend Abu Bakr. The early Muslim community includes people from every level of Arabian society. Wealthy merchants like Abu Bakr, freed slaves like Bilal ibn Rabah, and young idealists drawn by the message of equality and justice. But this message threatens the established order. The wealthy merchants of Mecca derive their power not just from trade, but from their role as guardians of the traditional Arabian religion centered on the Kaaba. If Muhammad's teachings gain widespread acceptance, their authority and economic interests will be undermined. They begin a campaign of persecution against the early Muslims, using economic boycotts, social isolation, and eventually physical violence to try to suppress the new faith. The persecution intensifies after Muhammad begins preaching publicly around 613 CE. Muslims are beaten in the streets, boycotted by their tribes, and forced to meet in secret. Some flee to the Christian kingdom of Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, where they receive protection from the Negus, a Christian king who recognizes the similarities between Islam and Christianity. Despite the persecution, or perhaps because of it, Islam continues to grow. The message resonates particularly strongly with those who have been marginalized by Meccan society: slaves, women, the poor, and members of weaker tribes. But it also attracts people from the wealthy classes who are genuinely moved by its ethical teachings. The turning point comes in 619 CE, a year Muslims called a year of sorrow. Both Khadija and Abu Talib die, leaving Muhammad without his most important personal support and political protection. The persecution intensifies to the point where the Prophet's life is in danger. It becomes clear that Islam cannot survive in Mecca under the current circumstances. In 622 CE, Muhammad makes one of the most important decisions in history. He accepts an invitation from the people of Yathrib, a city about 300 miles north of Mecca, to come and mediate their tribal disputes. This migration, known as the Hijra, marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar and represents far more than just a change of location. It's the birth of Islam as a political and social system, not just a religion. Yathrib, renamed Medina, the city, becomes the first Islamic state. Here, Muhammad isn't just a religious teacher, he's a political leader, military commander, and social reformer. The Constitution of Medina, one of history's first written constitutions, establishes principles of religious tolerance, collective security, and social justice that are remarkably advanced for their time. But Mecca isn't willing to let the Muslims go in peace. The merchant oligarchy sees Islam as an existential threat and begins organizing military expeditions to destroy the new community. This leads to a series of conflicts that will test not just the military capabilities of the early Muslims, but their commitment to their new faith and social order. The next decade will see the transformation of Islam from a persecuted religious minority into the dominant force in Arabia, setting the stage for one of history's most rapid and dramatic expansions. Chapter 4, 632 to 661 CE. The death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE creates a crisis that threatens to tear apart everything he built. In the traditional Arabian system, the death of a leader often means the dissolution of all alliances and agreements made with him personally. Many tribes across the peninsula begin withdrawing from their agreements with Medina, some refusing to pay taxes, others following rival prophets who claim divine revelation, and still others simply returning to their pre-Islamic practices. Abu Bakr, chosen as the first caliph successor, faces an impossible situation. The nascent Islamic State controls little more than the immediate area around Medina and Mecca. Most of the Arabian Peninsula is in open revolt, and the Byzantine and Persian empires watch from the sidelines, expecting this desert upstart to collapse within months. Instead, Abu Bakr makes a decision that will echo through history. He chooses to fight for unity. The Ridda Wars, or Wars of Apostasy, begin in 632 CE, but these aren't just religious conflicts. They raise a struggle for the very concept of Arabian unity versus the traditional system of tribal independence. Abu Bakr understands that if Islam survives only in isolated pockets, it will eventually be overwhelmed by larger, more established powers. Unity isn't just an ideal, it's a matter of survival. The architect of this campaign is Khalid ibn al-Walid, a former enemy who had converted to Islam just before the Prophet's death. Khalid earned his reputation fighting against the Muslims at the Battle of Uhud, where his cavalry charge nearly destroyed the Islamic army. Now, that same tactical genius is deployed in service of Islamic unity, and the results are devastating for the rebels. Khalid's campaigns are masterpieces of desert warfare. He moves with unprecedented speed, striking rebel concentrations before they can coordinate their efforts. His forces travel light, living off the land and using their intimate knowledge of desert conditions to outmaneuver larger enemy forces. In one famous operation, he crosses hundreds of miles of supposedly impassable desert to appear behind enemy lines at exactly the moment when his appearance causes maximum psychological impact. But Khalid's success isn't just due to military tactics. The Islamic forces offer something the traditional tribal system cannot: genuine equality and inclusion. Former slaves fight alongside former masters. Poor Bedouins serve as officers commanding wealthy merchants, and the spoils of war are distributed according to Islamic law rather than tribal hierarchy. This creates a powerful incentive for wavering tribes to remain loyal. The most significant rebellion is led by Musaylima al-Kadhib in the region of Najd. Musaylima claims to be a prophet equal to Muhammad and has built a substantial following among the powerful Banu Hanifa tribe. His movement represents more than just religious dissent. It is an attempt to create an alternative Arabian unity under different leadership. The confrontation comes at the Battle of Zafar in 632 CE. This isn't just a military engagement. It's a battle for the future of Arabia. Musaylama's forces are well-armed and highly motivated, fighting on familiar terrain with tribal warriors who have been perfecting desert combat for generations. The early stages of the battle go badly for the Muslims, with Musaylama's forces nearly breaking through their lines. The turning point comes when Khalid personally leads a cavalry charge that breaks the rebel center. Musaylama himself is killed in the fighting, and his death collapses the entire rebellion. But the victory comes at a terrible cost. Hundreds of early Muslims die in the battle, including many who have memorized large portions of the Quran. This loss prompts Abu Bakr to commission the first written compilation of the Islamic holy book, ensuring that the revelations won't be lost with the death of those who carried them in their memories. With the Ridda Wars concluded by 634 CE, the Islamic State controls the entire Arabian Peninsula for the first time in history. But Abu Bakr and his advisors understand that unity without purpose is fragile. The energy and enthusiasm that drove the unification campaigns need a new outlet, or they risk turning inward in destructive civil conflict. The solution is expansion beyond Arabia itself. The Byzantine and Persian empires, which have been fighting each other for decades, have left their Arabian frontiers lightly defended. Small Islamic raiding parties begin probing these borders, initially seeking nothing more than traditional booty and glory. What they discover astonishes everyone. The supposedly invincible imperial armies collapse at the first serious contact. The reasons for this unexpected success are complex. Both empires are exhausted by decades of warfare against each other. Their frontier populations, heavily taxed and religiously oppressed, often welcome the Arabs as liberators. The Islamic forces, unified by religious conviction and fresh from their victories in the Ridda Wars, fight with an intensity their enemies cannot match. In Iraq, Khalid ibn al-Walid leads a lightning campaign that overwhelms Persian resistance. His victory at the Battle of Alais is so complete that the battlefield is remembered as the River of Blood. Meanwhile, in Syria, other Islamic armies under Abu Ubaidah and Amr ibn al-As begin systematically dismantling Byzantine control over the Levant. The speed of these conquests catches everyone by surprise, including the Muslims themselves. Within just a few years, territories that had been under Roman or Persian control for centuries are being incorporated into the expanding Islamic State. Local populations often find Islamic rule more tolerant than what came before. Christians and Jews are permitted to practice their faiths freely upon payment of a tax, while the heavy imperial bureaucracies that had oppressed them for generations are dismantled. But success brings new challenges. How do you govern territories larger than the entire Arabian Peninsula with the administrative systems of a desert tribal confederation? How do you maintain the egalitarian ideals of early Islam when controlling vast populations of non-Arabs? And how do you prevent the wealth flowing from conquered territories from corrupting the very values that make conquest possible in the first place? These questions become increasingly urgent as the Islamic expansion continues. The death of Abu Bakr in 634 CE brings Umar ibn al-Khattab Tower as the second caliph. Under his leadership, the pace of expansion actually increases, with Islamic armies advancing simultaneously into Egypt, Persia, and Central Asia. The desert kingdoms of Arabia have become the core of a world empire. But the pressures of ruling that empire will soon test Islamic unity more severely than any external enemy ever could. Chapter 5, 661 to 750 CE. Under the Umayyad Caliphate, the Islamic Empire explodes across 3 continents with a speed that defies comprehension. In less than a century, Arab armies advance from the Atlantic shores of Morocco to the steppes of Central Asia, creating the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. But this isn't just military conquest. It has a complete transformation of the medieval world as political, economic, and cultural landscape. The capital moves from Medina to Damascus, symbolizing Islam's evolution from an Arabian religious movement to a global imperial power. The Umayyad Caliph, Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, faces challenges that would have overwhelmed any previous Arabian leader. He must govern populations speaking dozens of languages, practicing different religions, and living under vastly different economic and social systems. The traditional Arabian methods of tribal consultation and consensus become impossible when dealing with an empire stretching from Spain to India. The Umayyads solved this problem through administrative genius. Rather than imposing a uniform system across their territories, they adapt existing administrative structures to Islamic principles. Former Byzantine bureaucrats continue managing Syrian provinces. Persian administrators handle Iraqi taxation, and local elites throughout the empire retain significant autonomy as long as they accept Islamic oversight and pay appropriate taxes. This pragmatic approach enables rapid integration of conquered territories. In Egypt, the Islamic conquest actually reduces the tax burden on Coptic Christians, who had been heavily oppressed under Byzantine rule. Jewish communities throughout the empire experience a renaissance of learning and commerce, freed from centuries of Christian persecution. The result is that many conquered populations become willing partners in Islamic expansion rather than reluctant subjects. The economic implications are staggering. Trade routes that had been disrupted by Byzantine-Persian warfare are reopened and expanded. A merchant in Cordoba can now send goods safely to Delhi using Islamic commercial law and banking systems. The common use of Arabic as a commercial language eliminates communication barriers that had hindered trade for centuries. Gold from West Africa, spices from Southeast Asia, and silk from China flow through Islamic trading networks that connect previously isolated markets. This economic integration funds further military expansion. The wealth flowing into Damascus enables the Umayyads to maintain professional armies equipped with the best weapons and siege equipment available. Islamic naval forces, built using captured Byzantine and Persian shipyards, challenge enemy control of the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean. For the first time since the Roman Empire, a single power controls both the land and sea routes between Europe, Asia, and Africa. The conquest of Spain in 711 CE demonstrates the sophisticated military capabilities the Arabs have developed. Tariq ibn Ziyad lands at Gibraltar with just 7,000 men, facing a Visigothic kingdom that nominally controls the entire Iberian Peninsula. But the Islamic forces aren't just better equipped and trained. They are fighting for an idea that transcends traditional tribal or national loyalties. The Battle of Gaudelete destroys Visigothic power in a single engagement. King Roderick dies in the fighting, and his army dissolves as local commanders decide that resistance is futile. Within 7 years, Islamic forces control everything from the Pyrenees to Gibraltar, establishing Al-Andalus as one of medieval Europe's most prosperous and tolerant societies. But it's the attempted conquest of France that reveals both the power and limitations of Islamic expansion. In 732 CE, Abd al-Rahman al-Kafiki leads a massive army across the Pyrenees, seeking to extend Islamic control into the heart of Europe. The Frankish leader Charles Martel meets them at Tours in what becomes one of history's most significant battles. The Battle of Tours isn't just a military engagement. It is a clash between two completely different visions of European civilization. The Islamic forces represent a cosmopolitan, commercially oriented society that values learning, tolerance, and cultural exchange. The Franks represent a more traditional, militaristic culture centered on personal loyalty and Christian identity. The battle itself is decided by geography and tactics rather than ideology. The Frankish infantry, fighting in familiar terrain with shorter supply lines, proves capable of withstanding the Arab cavalry charges that had been devastatingly effective in open desert warfare. Abd al-Rahman dies in the fighting, and his army withdraws to Spain. The Islamic expansion into Europe stops at the Pyrenees, creating a cultural frontier that will shape European development for centuries. Meanwhile, in the East, Islamic armies are achieving even more spectacular successes. The conquest of Transoxiana brings Central Asian trade routes under Islamic control, while advances into the Indian subcontinent open new markets and sources of wealth. The Umayyad governor of Iraq, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, demonstrates remarkable administrative skill in managing these diverse territories while maintaining the military pressure necessary for continued expansion. Perhaps most importantly, this period sees the development of a distinctly Islamic civilization that transcends its Arabian origins. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, completed in 691 CE, announces to the world that Islam has arrived as a major cultural force. This isn't just a religious building. It is a statement of architectural and artistic sophistication that rivals anything produced by Byzantine or Persian civilization. The Great Mosque of Damascus, built on the site of a former Roman temple and Christian cathedral, symbolizes Islam's synthesis of previous cultural traditions with new innovations. The building incorporates Byzantine mosaics, Persian architectural techniques, and Arabian geometric patterns into something entirely new. It becomes a model for Islamic architecture throughout the empire and a center of learning that attracts scholars from across the known world. But the very success of Umayyad expansion creates new problems. The original Arabian elite increasingly struggles to maintain control over an empire where Arabs are a small minority. Non-Arab converts to Islam, known as Mawali, demand equal treatment and representation in government. Regional commanders develop independent power bases that challenge central authority, and the rapid influx of wealth begins to corrupt the egalitarian ideals that had originally motivated Islamic expansion. Religious and political tensions that had been suppressed during the excitement of conquest begin to surface. Different groups interpret Islamic law differently, dispute the legitimacy of Umayyad rule, and question whether worldly empire is compatible with spiritual mission. The stage is being set for civil conflicts that will ultimately bring down the Umayyad dynasty and fragment the Islamic empire. But before that fragmentation occurs, one more period of cultural and intellectual flowering will demonstrate just how far the desert kingdoms of Arabia have come from their humble origins as tribal confederations struggling to survive in harsh environments. Chapter 6, 750-1000 CE. The Abbasid Revolution of 750 CE marks more than just a change of dynasty. It represents the complete transformation of Islamic civilization from an Arab tribal confederation into a cosmopolitan world empire. When the Abbasids overthrow the Umayyads, they don't just seize political power. They relocate the capital from Damascus to Baghdad, symbolically moving the center of Islamic civilization from the Mediterranean world to the crossroads of Asia. Baghdad, the round city of peace, becomes perhaps the greatest metropolis the world has ever seen. Built on the banks of the Tigris River, it combines the administrative efficiency of Persian bureaucracy with the commercial dynamism of Arabian trade networks and the intellectual curiosity of Greek philosophy. By 900 CE, Baghdad houses over 2 million people, making it larger than any European city would be until the Industrial Revolution. The city's design reflects Abbasid ambitions. The circular layout, with the Caliph's palace at the center, demonstrates the integration of practical urban planning with symbolic representation of cosmic order. 4 main gates connect Baghdad to the trade routes leading to India, China, Europe, and Africa. The famous House of Wisdom becomes the world's largest library and research center, attracting scholars from every known civilization. This intellectual revolution begins with translation. Abbasid caliphs, particularly Harun al-Rashid and his son Al-Mun, sponsor massive translation projects that preserve and transmit the knowledge of ancient civilizations. Greek philosophy, Persian literature, Indian mathematics, and Chinese technology are all translated into Arabic, creating the world's first truly international scholarly language since Latin. But the Arabs don't just preserve this knowledge, they improve and expand it. Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi develops algebra as a distinct mathematical discipline, literally giving the subject its name from his book, Al-Kitab al-Muqtasir fi Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala. His work on algorithms, another word derived from his name, provides the mathematical foundation for everything from medieval commerce to modern computer science. Al-Kindi becomes the first philosopher to attempt a systematic integration of Greek rational thought with Islamic revelation. His approach to knowledge acquisition, emphasizing observation and experimentation over pure authority, influences scholars for centuries. The method he develops for combining empirical investigation with logical reasoning becomes the foundation for what we now call the scientific method. Ibn al-Haytham, known in the West as Al-Hazan, revolutionizes the study of optics through systematic experimentation. His camera obscura enables accurate observations of solar eclipses and provides crucial insights into the nature of light. More importantly, his insistence on experimental verification of theoretical claims helps establish scientific methodology as distinct from philosophical speculation. The medical advances of this period are equally remarkable. Al-Razi, known in Latin as Rhazes, produces the first accurate clinical description of smallpox and measles, enabling more effective treatment of these devastating diseases. His emphasis on careful observation and detailed record-keeping transforms medicine from a collection of traditional remedies into a systematic discipline based on empirical evidence. Ibn Sina, called Avicenna in the West, writes the Canon of Medicine, which becomes the standard medical textbook throughout Europe and the Islamic world for over 500 years. His integration of Greek anatomical knowledge with Islamic clinical practice and his systematic approach to diagnosis and treatment represents the pinnacle of medieval medical knowledge. The economic prosperity that funds these intellectual achievements comes from the Abbasids' genius for commercial organization. They develop sophisticated banking systems that enable international trade on an unprecedented scale. Letters of credit issued in Baghdad are honored in markets from Cordoba to Delhi. Standardized weights, measures, and currency facilitate transactions across vast distances and cultural barriers. This commercial network becomes a highway for technological and cultural exchange. Papermaking technology arrives from China and revolutionizes record-keeping and scholarship throughout the Islamic world. New crops from India and Southeast Asia transform agriculture in the Middle East and North Africa. Navigational instruments developed by Arab sailors enable more accurate and safer sea travel, opening new maritime trade routes. The cultural synthesis achieved during this period creates artistic and literary innovations that influence world civilization. The 1001 Nights, compiled during the Abbasid period, blends Persian, Indian, and Arabian storytelling traditions into narratives that capture the cosmopolitan spirit of Islamic civilization. These stories don't just entertain, they preserve and transmit cultural values, historical memories, and practical knowledge across linguistic and ethnic boundaries. Islamic art develops its distinctive characteristics during this period, emphasizing geometric patterns, calligraphy, and architectural innovation over representational imagery. This isn't just aesthetic preference. It reflects a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and philosophy. Islamic geometric patterns demonstrate complex, mathematical relationships while creating visual experiences that inspire contemplation and spiritual reflection. Architecture reaches new heights of sophistication and beauty. The Great Mosque of Samarra, with its distinctive spiral minaret, demonstrates engineering capabilities that rival anything produced by contemporary civilizations. The palace complexes at Baghdad and Samarra showcase artistic and architectural innovations that influence building styles from Spain to Central Asia. But perhaps the most remarkable achievement of the Abbasid period is the creation of a genuinely multicultural civilization that maintains unity without imposing uniformity. Christians, Jews, Muslims, and followers of other faiths collaborate in scholarly endeavors. Persian, Arab, Turkish, and other ethnic groups contribute to government and military leadership. Former slaves rise to positions of power and influence based on merit rather than birth. This tolerance isn't just idealistic, it's practical. The Abbasids understand that their empire's strength comes from its diversity. Different groups contribute different skills and knowledge. Christians and Jews often serve as administrators and translators. Persians provide bureaucratic expertise. Turks become elite military units. Arabs maintain their role as religious and legal scholars. However, the very success of this system begins to create new problems. As the empire becomes more prosperous and sophisticated, it also becomes more complex and difficult to govern. Regional governors develop independent power bases. Military units recruited from different ethnic groups compete for influence. Religious scholars debate the proper relationship between worldly success and spiritual purity. The unity that had enabled Islamic expansion begins to fragment as different groups pursue conflicting interests. The stage is being set for the political fragmentation that will end Abbasid unity while somehow preserving and spreading Islamic civilization across an even broader area. Chapter 7, 1000 to 1250 CE. The disintegration of centralized Abbasid power doesn't mark the decline of Islamic civilization. Instead, it triggers an explosion of regional creativity and innovation that spreads Islamic culture across an even broader geographical area. As the Caliph in Baghdad loses effective control over distant provinces, local dynasties emerge that maintain Islamic identity while adapting to regional conditions and opportunities. In Spain, the Umayyad survivors who escaped the Abbasid revolution create a rival caliphate centered in Cordoba. Abd al-Rahman III transforms Al-Andalus into perhaps the most prosperous and culturally sophisticated society in medieval Europe. Cordoba becomes a center of learning that attracts scholars from across the Mediterranean, while Islamic Spain develops a unique architectural style that blends Arabian, Persian, and local Iberian elements. The Great Mosque of Cordoba demonstrates this cultural synthesis. Its forest of horseshoe arches supported by columns taken from Roman and Visigothic buildings creates a visual experience unlike anything else in the Islamic world. The building grows organically over several centuries, with each expansion reflecting the increasing confidence and prosperity of Andalusi civilization. Intellectual life in Islamic Spain reaches extraordinary heights. Ibn Rushd, known in Latin as Averroes, develops philosophical arguments that will influence European thought for centuries. His commentaries on Aristotle provide the foundation for scholastic philosophy, while his attempts to reconcile reason and revelation anticipate many of the debates that will shape both Islamic and Christian theology. Ibn Arabi creates a sophisticated mystical philosophy that influences Sufi thought throughout the Islamic world. His concept of the unity of being provides a framework for understanding the relationship between divine and human consciousness that transcends traditional theological boundaries. His poetry and prose inspire spiritual seekers from Andalusia to Central Asia. The scientific achievements of Islamic Spain are equally remarkable. Abbas ibn Firnas conducts early experiments in flight, creating wings that enable him to glide for several minutes. Al-Zarqali develops astronomical instruments and calculation methods that improve the accuracy of calendar systems and navigational techniques. The Toledan tables become the standard astronomical reference throughout medieval Europe. Meanwhile, in Egypt and Syria, the Fatimid Caliphate represents a completely different approach to Islamic governance. The Fatimids claim descent from the Prophet Muhammad through his daughter Fatima, challenging both Abbasid and Umayyad legitimacy. Their Shia Islam emphasizes the role of divinely guided leaders and creates a more hierarchical social structure than the egalitarian ideals of early Islamic society. Cairo, the Fatimid capital, becomes a serious rival to Baghdad as a center of Islamic learning and culture. Al-Azhar University, founded in 970 CE, becomes one of the world's oldest continuously operating educational institutions. Its curriculum combines religious scholarship with practical subjects like medicine, mathematics, and law, creating graduates who serve throughout the Islamic world as teachers, judges, and administrators. The Fatimids also pioneer new approaches to international trade and diplomacy. Their control of Egypt enables them to dominate the Red Sea trade routes connecting the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. They develop sophisticated relationships with Indian Ocean merchants, Italian city-states, and African kingdoms, creating commercial networks that bypass traditional overland routes controlled by their Abbasid rivals. Further east, the Ghaznavid Empire demonstrates how Islamic expansion adapts to new environments and opportunities. Mahmud of Ghazni leads 17 military expeditions into India, but these aren't just raids for plunder. Each campaign establishes Islamic political control over new territories, introduces Islamic administrative systems, and creates opportunities for peaceful cultural exchange. The wealth flowing from these Indian campaigns funds remarkable cultural achievements. The court at Ghazni attracts poets, scholars, and artists from across the Islamic world. Ferdowsi completes the Shahnameh, the great Persian national epic, under Ghaznavid patronage. This work preserves pre-Islamic Persian cultural memory while integrating it with Islamic values and worldview. Al-Biruni, working under Ghaznavid patronage, conducts the first systematic study of Indian civilization by a Muslim scholar. His Kitab al-Hind provides detailed, respectful analysis of Hindu philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. His approach demonstrates the intellectual curiosity and cultural tolerance that characterizes Islamic civilization at its best. The Seljuk Turks represent yet another model of Islamic adaptation and expansion. Originally nomadic peoples from Central Asia, they convert to Islam and rapidly become its most effective military defenders. Their victory over the Byzantine Empire at Manzikert in 1071 CE opens Anatolia to Turkish settlement and Islamic influence. The Seljuks develop a unique synthesis of Turkish military traditions, Persian administrative practices, and Islamic religious principles. Their madrasa system creates a network of educational institutions that standardizes Islamic legal and theological education throughout their territories. These schools produce scholars and administrators who serve Islamic governments from Spain to Central Asia. Seljuk architecture develops its own distinctive characteristics, emphasizing massive domes, intricate geometric decoration, and innovative structural techniques. The Friday Mosque of Isfahan becomes a masterpiece of Islamic architecture, while Seljuk caravanserais facilitate trade and travel along the Silk Road routes. But perhaps the most significant development of this period is the rise of Sufi mysticism as a unifying force within Islamic civilization. As political unity fragments, spiritual and cultural unity actually increases through the influence of Sufi orders that transcend ethnic and political boundaries. Al-Ghazali, writing in the late 11th century, provides intellectual respectability for mystical approaches to Islamic spirituality. His revival of the religious sciences integrates rigorous Islamic scholarship with personal spiritual experience, creating a model for religious life that appeals to both scholars and common believers. Sufi poetry becomes a vehicle for expressing both spiritual longing and cultural identity. Rumi's verses, written in Persian but incorporating Arabic and Turkish elements, speak to universal human experiences while remaining firmly grounded in Islamic spirituality. His poetry is memorized and recited from Morocco to Indonesia, creating shared cultural references that unite diverse Islamic societies. The period also sees remarkable innovations in military technology and tactics. Islamic engineers develop new siege techniques, improve metallurgy for weapons production, and create new types of fortifications. The famous Greek fire used by Byzantine forces is reverse-engineered and improved, giving Islamic naval forces new capabilities in maritime warfare. However, this fragmentation also creates vulnerabilities. The competing Islamic dynasties often fight each other rather than coordinating against external threats. The success of the First Crusade in 1099 CE results partly from the inability of nearby Islamic powers to mount an effective coordinated response. The stage is being set for new challenges that will test whether the cultural and spiritual unity of Islamic civilization can survive the loss of political unity. External pressures from Crusaders in the West and new nomadic invasions from the East will force Islamic societies to adapt once again or face destruction. Chapter 8, 1095 to 1250 CE, the call for crusade issued by Pope Urban II in 1095. CE sends shockwaves through the Islamic world, but not for the reasons many might expect. The initial Muslim response isn't panic or despair, it's confusion and disbelief. For centuries, Islamic armies have been expanding into Christian territories, while Christian forces have been primarily defensive. The idea that European Christians would launch a holy war to reconquer Jerusalem seems almost absurd to contemporary Muslim observers. This initial dismissive attitude proves costly. When the First Crusade arrives in the Levant in 1097, it encounters a fragmented Islamic political landscape. The Fatimids control Egypt and southern Syria. The Seljuks dominate northern Syria and Anatolia, and various local rulers control key cities like Damascus and Aleppo. These Muslim powers are often more concerned with fighting each other than confronting the Crusader threat. The fall of Jerusalem in 1099 CE changes everything. The Crusaders' massacre of the city, its Muslim and Jewish inhabitants, shocks the Islamic world and destroys any illusions about Crusader intentions. Contemporary accounts describe the horror in vivid detail. Blood flowing ankle-deep in the streets. Entire families exterminated, mosques and madrasas burned with their scholars inside. But the Crusader success also reveals fundamental weaknesses in Islamic military organization. The traditional reliance on tribal levies and temporary alliances proves inadequate against disciplined European heavy cavalry and sophisticated siege techniques. Islamic commanders must rapidly develop new military technologies and tactical approaches. The response begins with Umayyad ad-Din Zengi, the Turkish governor of Mosul, who recognizes that defeating the Crusaders requires more than military innovation. It demands political and religious unification of the Islamic response. Zengi begins the process of consolidating Muslim Syria under unified command, using a combination of military conquest, diplomatic alliance, and religious appeal. Zengi's recapture of Edessa in 1144 CE marks the beginning of effective Islamic resistance. But his greatest contribution isn't military. It is his recognition that the struggle against the Crusaders must be framed as a religious obligation that transcends the political divisions within Islamic society. He begins using the concept of jihad not just as personal spiritual struggle, but as collective defensive warfare against foreign invasion. This religious framework is developed and popularized by Zengi's son, Nur al-Din, who transforms the anti-Crusader struggle into a comprehensive program of Islamic renewal. Nur al-Din doesn't just fight the Crusaders militarily, he reforms Islamic education, sponsors religious scholarship, and promotes the construction of madrasas and mosques throughout his territories. The madrasas serve multiple purposes in this campaign. They standardize Islamic education and create a shared intellectual framework among Muslim elites. They train administrators and military officers needed for unified resistance. and they serve as centers for anti-Crusader propaganda that frames the struggle in religious rather than merely political terms. Nur al-Din also pioneers new military technologies and organizational methods. He develops professional training programs for military officers, standardizes equipment and tactics, and creates supply systems that enable sustained campaigns. His forces begin using crossbows, improved siege engines, and new cavalry tactics adapted from both European and Central Asian models. But it's Salah al-Din, Saladin, who brings these innovations to fruition and becomes the most famous Islamic leader of the Crusader period. Originally a Kurdish military officer serving under Nur al-Din, Saladin demonstrates the meritocratic aspects of Islamic society that enable talented individuals to rise regardless of their ethnic origins. Saladin's genius lies not just in military leadership, but in his ability to unite the disparate elements of Islamic society behind a common cause. He negotiates complex alliances between Turkish military units, Arab tribal leaders, Kurdish commanders, and Egyptian administrators. His success demonstrates that Islamic civilization, despite its political fragmentation, retains sufficient cultural unity to mount effective collective responses to external threats. The recapture of Jerusalem in 1187 CE becomes a masterpiece of military planning and execution. Saladin's victory at the Battle of Hattin destroys the main Crusader army and opens the way to Jerusalem. But his treatment of the conquered city contrasts dramatically with the Crusader massacre nearly a century earlier. Instead of mass slaughter, Saladin offers terms that allow Christian inhabitants to leave safely or remain under Islamic protection. This magnanimous behavior isn't just personal character. It reflects sophisticated understanding of international relations and propaganda warfare. Saladin recognizes that Islamic legitimacy depends partly on demonstrating moral superiority over Crusader methods. His chivalrous conduct toward defeated enemies becomes legendary even in Europe, where he's admired by the very people whose armies he defeats. The Third Crusade, led by Richard the Lionheart, Philip Augustus, and Frederick Barbarossa, represents Europe's most serious attempt to reverse Saladin's victories. The campaign demonstrates the military innovations both sides have developed during a century of warfare. Crusader forces now include Muslim military techniques and equipment, while Islamic armies incorporate European tactical innovations. The inconclusive outcome of the Third Crusade reveals the strategic stalemate that characterizes the later Crusader period. Neither side possesses sufficient military superiority to achieve decisive victory. The Crusader states survive as narrow coastal enclaves, while Islamic forces control the interior but cannot completely eliminate European presence. This stalemate encourages both sides to develop more sophisticated diplomatic and commercial relationships. Frederick II's negotiated recovery of Jerusalem during the Sixth Crusade demonstrates that accommodation is often more effective than warfare. The treaty he signs with Al-Kamil, Saladin's nephew, creates a complex sharing arrangement that satisfies both Christian and Muslim religious requirements. The later Crusader period also sees remarkable cultural exchange, despite ongoing military conflict. European scholars study in Islamic universities. Islamic scientific and philosophical works are translated into Latin, and architectural styles blend Christian and Islamic elements. The Crusader castles incorporate Islamic defensive innovations, while Islamic fortifications adapt European siege-resistant designs. Trade relationships develop that transcend religious boundaries. Italian merchants establish permanent colonies in Islamic ports, while Muslim traders operate freely in Crusader territories. These commercial relationships often prove more durable than military alliances, creating economic incentives for peaceful coexistence. The final elimination of the Crusader states by the Mamluk Sultan Baybars in the 1290s marks the end of 2 centuries of warfare, but not the end of Christian-Muslim interaction in the region. The Crusader period has fundamentally changed both Islamic and European civilization, creating new military technologies, diplomatic practices, and cultural exchanges that influence both societies for centuries. More importantly for Islamic history, the Crusader challenge has forced the development of new forms of political and military organization that will prove crucial in facing the even greater threat approaching from the east, the Mongol invasions that will test Islamic civilization more severely than any previous challenge. Chapter 9, 1206 to 1300 CE. The appearance of Mongol armies on the eastern borders of the Islamic world in the early 13th century represents a threat unlike anything Islamic civilization has previously encountered. Unlike the Crusaders who seek to conquer specific territories for religious and political reasons, the Mongols under Genghis Khan and his successors waged total war that aims not just at conquest, but at the complete destruction of existing political and social structures. The first contact comes in 1219 CE, when Genghis Khan demands the submission of the Khwarezm-Shah, the Turkish dynasty that controls much of eastern Iran and Central Asia. The Khwarezm-Shah's refusal to submit leads to a campaign that demonstrates the Mongols' revolutionary approach to warfare. They don't just defeat armies, they systematically destroy cities, massacre populations, and obliterate the agricultural and commercial infrastructure that supports Islamic civilization. The Siege of Bukhara in 1220 CE provides a terrifying preview of what's to come. The Mongols don't simply capture the city. They empty it of all inhabitants, burn the buildings, and level the walls so thoroughly that later travelers report finding only ruins where one of Central Asia's greatest commercial centers once stood. The Great Library, with its irreplaceable manuscripts, is used as fuel for cooking fires. What makes the Mongol threat so devastating isn't just their military effectiveness, but their complete indifference to the cultural and religious values that Islamic societies consider sacred. Previous conquerors, whether Byzantine, Persian, or Crusader, have generally respected scholarly institutions, preserved architectural monuments, and maintained existing commercial relationships. The Mongols destroy everything with methodical efficiency. The fall of Samarkand follows the same pattern. This city, which had been a jewel of Islamic civilization for centuries, is reduced to rubble within days. Contemporary accounts describe the Mongol practice of forcing captured artisans and scholars to march ahead of their armies, using skilled prisoners as human shields during siege operations. Survivors are often executed after serving their purpose. The psychological impact of these defeats reverberates throughout the Islamic world. For the first time since the early Arab conquests, Islamic societies face an enemy that seems genuinely unstoppable. Traditional military tactics prove useless against Mongol mobility and organization. Diplomatic negotiations fail because the Mongols don't share Islamic concepts of honor, treaty obligations, or protected status for non-combatants. The Mongol conquest of Baghdad in 1258 CE marks the symbolic end of the classical Islamic period. The Abbasid Caliph, the nominal leader of all Muslims, is rolled in a carpet and trampled to death by horses. The House of Wisdom, repository of centuries of scholarly work, is thrown into the Tigris River along with its librarians. Contemporary sources claim the river runs black with ink for months. But the Mongol impact extends far beyond symbolic destruction. They systematically dismantle the irrigation systems that support agriculture throughout Iran and Iraq. Cities that had flourished for centuries are abandoned as their populations flee or die. Trade routes that have connected Asia, Europe, and Africa are disrupted for decades. However, the Mongol invasions also revealed the remarkable resilience and adaptability of Islamic civilization. In Egypt, the Mamluk Sultanate successfully resists Mongol expansion, demonstrating that Islamic military forces can adapt to meet the Mongol threat. The Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260 CE proves that Mongol forces are not invincible when confronted by properly organized and equipped opponents. The Mamluk victory isn't just a military achievement. It's a cultural and psychological turning point. The Mamluks, originally slave soldiers recruited from Central Asia and the Caucasus, demonstrate that Islamic society can still produce effective leadership even under extreme pressure. Their success in preserving Egypt and Syria ensures that crucial elements of Islamic civilization survive the Mongol onslaught. More surprisingly, the Mongols themselves begin adapting to Islamic civilization within a generation of their conquests. In Persia, the Ilkhanate rulers convert to Islam and begin patronizing traditional Islamic institutions. They sponsor the reconstruction of destroyed cities, support scholarly activities, and commission artistic works that blend Mongol and Islamic elements. This adaptation process creates new forms of Islamic culture that incorporate Mongol administrative practices and artistic traditions. Persian miniature painting develops new styles influenced by Chinese artistic techniques brought by Mongol administrators. Islamic architecture begins incorporating decorative elements and spatial concepts derived from Central Asian nomadic traditions. The conversion of Ghazan Khan to Islam in 1295 CE symbolizes this transformation. As Ilkhan ruler of Persia, Ghazan adopts traditional Islamic titles and begins ruling according to Islamic law. He sponsors the reconstruction of destroyed mosques and madrasas, while encouraging scholarly activities that had been suppressed during the initial conquest period. Similarly, in Central Asia, the Golden Horde gradually adopts Islamic practices while maintaining their Mongol political structure. This creates hybrid societies that preserve nomadic military traditions while embracing Islamic commercial and legal systems. Cities like Sarai become centers of Islamic learning that attract scholars from throughout the Muslim world. The most remarkable example of this synthesis occurs in India, where the Delhi Sultanate successfully resists Mongol expansion while adopting military innovations learned from their enemies. The sultans developed new cavalry tactics, improved siege techniques, and administrative practices that combine Islamic and Mongol elements. By 1300 CE, the Mongol threat has been either defeated or absorbed throughout most of the Islamic world. The immediate crisis is past, but its effects continue to influence Islamic development for centuries. The destruction of Baghdad ends the fiction of universal Islamic political unity, forcing Islamic societies to develop new forms of legitimacy and organization. The demographic and economic devastation in Iran and Iraq permanently alters the balance of power within the Islamic world. Egypt and Syria emerge as the new centers of Islamic civilization, while Anatolia and India become increasingly important as Mongol pressure forces migration and cultural exchange. Perhaps most importantly, the Mongol invasions demonstrate both the vulnerability and the resilience of Islamic civilization. The ease with which centuries of cultural achievement can be destroyed by military force provides sobering lessons about the fragility of civilized life. But the ability of Islamic societies to survive, adapt, and eventually transform their conquerors demonstrates the deep roots and continuing vitality of Islamic cultural values. The stage is now set for a new phase of Islamic development, one in which political fragmentation is balanced by cultural creativity and expansion into new geographical areas through both conquest and peaceful conversion. Chapter 10, 1300 to 1500 CE. As the smoke clears from the Mongol devastation, Islamic civilization begins reconstituting itself around new centers of power that emerge from the ashes of the old order. Rather than attempting to recreate the centralized caliphate, Islamic societies develop multiple competing centers of political and cultural authority, each adapting Islamic principles to local conditions and opportunities. In Egypt and Syria, the Mamluk Sultanate emerges as the self-proclaimed guardian of Sunni Islamic orthodoxy. The Mamluks, originally slave soldiers recruited from Central Asian steppes and Caucasian mountains, create one of medieval history's most remarkable military and political systems. These warriors, torn from their families as children and trained exclusively for warfare, develop a fierce loyalty to their military brotherhood that transcends ethnic and tribal divisions. The Mamluk system represents a unique solution to the problem of political stability in a culturally diverse empire. Since the ruling elite has no ethnic or tribal base within the territories they govern, they cannot favor particular groups or regions. Their legitimacy depends entirely on military effectiveness and religious orthodoxy, creating incentives for competent governance and protection of Islamic institutions. Under Mamluk rule, Cairo becomes the unofficial capital of the Sunni Islamic world. Al-Azhar University expands its influence, training scholars and judges who serve throughout the Islamic world. The Mamluks sponsor massive architectural projects that demonstrate their wealth and piety, including the mosque madrasa complexes that still dominate Cairo's skyline. But Mamluk power rests on more than military might and religious legitimacy. They control the spice trade between Asia and Europe, collecting enormous revenues from the pepper, cinnamon, and other exotic goods that flow through Red Sea ports. This commercial dominance enables them to maintain the most professional military force in the medieval world and to patronize scholarship and architecture on an unprecedented scale. Mamluk military innovations influence warfare throughout the medieval world. They develop new cavalry tactics that prove effective against both Mongol horsemen and European knights. Their use of early firearms, including the first cannons employed in the Middle East, demonstrates their willingness to adopt new technologies regardless of their origins. Meanwhile, in Anatolia, the Ottoman Beylik Principality begins its remarkable transformation from a small frontier state into one of history's greatest empires. Osman I and his successors represent a new type of Islamic leadership that combines Turkish military traditions with Islamic legitimacy and Byzantine administrative expertise. The Ottoman success formula relies on incorporating diverse populations and traditions rather than imposing Turkish uniformity. Christian converts to Islam rise to the highest levels of Ottoman administration and military command. The Devshirme system, which recruits Christian boys for conversion and training as elite soldiers and administrators, creates a governing class loyal only to the Sultan and the Islamic State. Ottoman expansion into Europe demonstrates Islam's continued vitality and adaptability. The conquest of Adrianople in 1361 CE gives the Ottomans a European capital and base for further expansion. The Battle of Kosovo in 1389 CE, though tactically inconclusive, establishes Ottoman dominance over the Balkans and opens the way for expansion toward Hungary and Poland. This European expansion isn't just military conquest. It is a complex process of cultural and religious transformation. Many Balkan Christians convert to Islam, attracted by the opportunities for advancement and the relatively tolerant nature of Ottoman rule. The Ottomans developed the millet system, which grants autonomy to religious communities while ensuring their loyalty to the imperial state. Ottoman architecture develops its distinctive characteristics during this period, blending Islamic, Byzantine, and local Anatolian elements. The early Ottoman mosques, such as the Great Mosque of Bursa, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of both structural engineering and aesthetic design. These buildings announce Ottoman arrival as a major cultural force while respecting local architectural traditions. In Persia, the rise of the Safavid dynasty marks another completely different approach to Islamic revival. The Safavids emerge from a Sufi religious order that gradually develops political and military capabilities. Their adoption of Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion creates the first explicitly Shia Islamic state since the early Fatimid period. Shah Ismail's conquest of Tabriz in 1501 CE and subsequent unification of Persia represents more than just political change. It's a religious revolution that transforms Persian society. The forced conversion of Persia's predominantly Sunni population to Shia Islam creates a distinct Persian Islamic identity that differentiates it from both Ottoman Turkey and Mamluk Egypt. This religious transformation has profound cultural implications. Persian becomes increasingly identified with Shia Islam, while Arabic and Turkish are associated with Sunni traditions. The Safavids sponsor a revival of Persian literature and art that emphasizes themes of martyrdom, suffering, and resistance to oppression, themes that resonate with Shia theological concepts. Safavid Isfahan becomes one of the world's most beautiful cities, demonstrating Persian Islamic civilization at its finest. The Shah Abbas's architectural projects, including the Umayyad Mosque and the Royal Palace, showcase Persian artistic traditions while incorporating new influences from Ottoman Turkey and Mughal India. The competition between Ottoman and Safavid empires creates a dynamic tension that drives innovation in both societies. Their rivalry isn't just political, it's religious, cultural, and technological. Each empire seeks to demonstrate the superiority of its version of Islam through military success, architectural achievement, and scholarly production. This competition extends to trade and diplomacy. Both empires seek to control the lucrative routes connecting Europe and Asia. The Ottomans focus on Mediterranean and Black Sea trade, while the Safavids develop connections with emerging European maritime powers, seeking alternatives to Ottoman-controlled routes. In India, the Delhi Sultanate fragments into competing regional kingdoms, but Islamic influence continues expanding through both conquest and peaceful conversion. The Bahmani Sultanate in the Deccan demonstrates the continued vitality of Islamic political and military traditions, while the Bengal Sultanate shows how Islam adapts to local conditions in different geographical and cultural environments. Islamic expansion in Southeast Asia during this period occurs primarily through peaceful means rather than military conquest. Muslim merchants and scholars establish communities in coastal trading centers, where they serve as intermediaries between local rulers and international trading networks. The gradual conversion of local populations to Islam often occurs over several generations, as people are attracted by the commercial opportunities and social mobility that Islamic society offers. The establishment of Islamic sultanates in Java, Sumatra, and the Malay Peninsula creates new centers of Islamic civilization that blend Arabian and Persian religious traditions with local cultural practices. These societies develop their own distinctive forms of Islamic art, architecture, and literature that reflect their unique historical experiences. By 1500 CE, Islamic civilization has not only recovered from the Mongol devastation, but has expanded into new geographical areas and developed new forms of political and cultural organization. The emergence of multiple competing centers of Islamic power creates a dynamic, innovative environment that will influence world history for centuries to come. Chapter 11. 1500 to 1800 CE. The year 1500 CE marks a watershed moment for Islamic civilization, as three great empires, the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals, reached the pinnacle of their power while simultaneously facing unprecedented challenges from European maritime expansion and technological innovation. This period witnesses both the greatest territorial extent of Islamic political control and the beginning of fundamental transformations that will reshape the relationship between Islamic societies and the broader world. The Ottoman Empire under Suleiman the Magnificent represents Islamic power at its most impressive. The conquest of Constantinople in 1453 CE has already eliminated the last remnant of the Byzantine Empire, while Ottoman forces continue advancing into Europe, reaching the gates of Vienna in 1529 CE. From their perspective, the Ottomans aren't just another regional power. They're the latest incarnation of the Roman Empire, inheriting both its political authority and its universal mission. Ottoman success rests on remarkable institutional innovations that enable effective governance of an empire spanning 3 continents. The devshirme system continues producing elite administrators and soldiers whose loyalty belongs solely to the Sultan and the Islamic State. The Canaan legal system provides a sophisticated framework for governing diverse populations while maintaining Islamic legitimacy. The Timur military administrative system ensures effective control of agricultural production while maintaining military readiness. The sophistication of the Ottoman administration becomes apparent when examining the detailed records maintained by the imperial bureaucracy. The Ottomans developed what may be history's most comprehensive system of population registration, taxation, and resource management. The Nabataean surveys document every household, every plot of agricultural land, and every source of revenue throughout the empire. These records enable Ottoman administrators to track demographic changes, adjust tax assessments, and identify potential military recruits with unprecedented precision. The Ottoman approach to governing diverse populations represents a masterpiece of political engineering. Rather than attempting to create cultural uniformity, the Ottomans developed the millet system, which grants significant autonomy to religious communities while ensuring their integration into the imperial structure. Greek Orthodox Christians, Armenian Christians, Jews, and various other groups maintain their own religious courts, educational institutions, and social services while participating in the broader Ottoman economy and political system. This system creates incentives for loyalty rather than resistance. Religious leaders become stakeholders in Ottoman success, responsible for maintaining order within their communities while serving as intermediaries between their followers and the imperial government. The result is a level of internal stability that enables the Ottomans to focus their military resources on external expansion rather than internal control. The devshirme system represents perhaps the most innovative aspect of Ottoman administration. By recruiting Christian boys from the Balkans and Anatolia, converting them to Islam, and training them as elite soldiers and administrators, the Ottomans create a governing class that owes everything to the Sultan and nothing to traditional power structures. These devshirme recruits often rise to the highest positions in the empire, including Grand Vizier and Provincial Governor. This meritocratic aspect of Ottoman governance attracts talented individuals from throughout the empire and beyond. Stories circulate of peasant boys who rise to command armies and govern provinces, creating powerful incentives for loyalty and service. The system also ensures that the highest levels of Ottoman government remain staffed by individuals with direct experience of the empire as diverse populations and regions. Suleiman's legal reforms earn him the title lawgiver in Islamic history. His canon name, legal codes, create a comprehensive system that balances Islamic religious law with practical administrative requirements. These codes address everything from taxation and criminal justice to guild regulations and market supervision, providing a legal framework sophisticated enough to govern one of the world's most complex societies. The canon name represents more than just legal compilation. It demonstrates the Ottoman ability to synthesize diverse legal traditions into coherent administrative systems. Roman law, Byzantine administrative practice, Islamic jurisprudence, and local customary law all contribute to Ottoman legal codes that prove flexible enough to govern territories from Hungary to Yemen. Ottoman architectural achievements during this period represent the pinnacle of Islamic building arts. Mimar Sinan, perhaps history's greatest architect, creates masterpieces like the Suleimani Mosque that surpass even Byzantine achievements in structural engineering and aesthetic beauty. These buildings aren't just religious structures. They're statements of imperial power and cultural sophistication that rival anything being produced in Renaissance Europe. Sinan's architectural innovations extend far beyond individual buildings to comprehensive urban planning. His mosque complexes, integrate religious, educational, commercial, and social service functions in carefully planned environments that serve entire urban districts. The Suleimani complex includes not only the Great Mosque but also madrasas, a hospital, a caravanserai, shops, bathhouses, and a cemetery, creating self-contained urban environments that demonstrate Ottoman social and architectural vision. The technical innovations employed by Sinan and his contemporaries push the boundaries of what's possible with traditional building materials and techniques. The Selimi Mosque in Edirne achieves a dome larger than Hagia Sophia's, while creating an interior space of unprecedented unity and harmony. These achievements require not only artistic vision, but also sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, acoustics, and environmental control. Ottoman urban planning extends beyond individual building complexes to entire city layouts. The reconstruction of Istanbul after 1453 creates a model Islamic city that integrates Byzantine heritage with Ottoman innovation. New neighborhoods are planned around mosque complexes, while existing Byzantine structures are adapted for Islamic use. The result is an urban environment that demonstrates cultural synthesis while meeting the practical needs of a diverse population. The Ottoman approach to public infrastructure sets new standards for urban amenities. The empire's system of public fountains, bridges, and caravanserais creates a network of facilities that supports both local populations and long-distance travelers. These infrastructure projects demonstrate the Ottoman commitment to public welfare while showcasing imperial wealth and engineering capabilities. The Ottoman Navy dominates the Mediterranean, challenging European maritime supremacy and maintaining Islamic control over crucial trade routes. Ottoman admirals like Barbarossa and Piri race demonstrate that Islamic societies can master new military technologies and tactical innovations. Piri raises world maps, incorporating information from recently discovered American territories, show that Ottoman scholars remain at the forefront of geographical knowledge. The development of Ottoman naval power represents a remarkable adaptation to changing military and economic circumstances. Traditional Islamic military strength had been based on cavalry forces suited to land warfare, but the emergence of gunpowder weapons and European maritime expansion requires new approaches to military organization. The Ottomans respond by creating one of the world's most formidable naval forces. Ottoman shipbuilding techniques combine traditional Mediterranean practices with innovations learned from captured European vessels and recruited European shipwrights. Ottoman galleys incorporate improved artillery systems, while Ottoman galleons demonstrate mastery of the latest European shipbuilding techniques. The imperial arsenal at Istanbul becomes one of Europe's largest and most sophisticated shipbuilding facilities. Piri Reis's cartographic achievements demonstrate the Ottoman commitment to maintaining superiority in geographical knowledge. His world map of 1513, incorporating information from Columbus's voyages and other recent discoveries, shows that Ottoman scholars have access to the latest geographical information and the technical skills to utilize it effectively. His Book of Navigation provides detailed sailing directions for the entire Mediterranean, demonstrating the practical application of geographical knowledge to maritime operations. The Ottoman naval presence in the Indian Ocean represents an ambitious attempt to challenge Portuguese expansion and maintain Islamic influence in crucial trade routes. Ottoman fleets operating from bases in Egypt and Yemen demonstrate that Islamic naval power can project force across vast oceanic distances. These operations require sophisticated logistics, navigation, and supply systems that showcase Ottoman organizational capabilities. Meanwhile, the Safavid Empire under Shah Abbas the Great transforms Persia into a major regional power that successfully resists Ottoman expansion while developing its own distinctive form of Islamic civilization. The Safavid capital at Isfahan becomes known as half the world for its beauty and sophistication, demonstrating that Shia Islam can produce cultural achievements rivaling those of any contemporary society. Safavid success rests partly on their ability to integrate diverse populations under Shia Islamic identity. The conversion of Persia's Sunni majority to Shia Islam creates a sense of national unity that enables effective resistance to Ottoman pressure. But this religious transformation also creates new cultural innovations. As Persian Shia Islam develops distinctive theological, artistic, and literary traditions, the Safavid approach to religious conversion demonstrates sophisticated understanding of cultural and political psychology. Rather than relying solely on force, the Safavids attract voluntary conversion through economic incentives, social advancement, and cultural appeal. Shia Islam is presented not just as religious truth, but as Persian national identity, creating powerful incentives for adoption among populations seeking to assert their independence from Ottoman Turkish influence. The architectural transformation of Isfahan under Shah Abbas represents one of history's most ambitious urban planning projects. The new city center, built around the vast Naqshi Jahan Square, creates a unified architectural environment that showcases Safavid power while providing spaces for commerce, worship, and royal ceremony. The square, surrounded by the Imam Mosque, Sheikh Lotfullah Mosque, Ali Kapu Palace, and the Grand Bazaar, demonstrates the integration of religious, political, and economic functions in Safavid urban planning. Safavid artistic achievements create new standards for Islamic decorative arts. Persian carpet weaving reaches unprecedented levels of technical sophistication and artistic beauty under Safavid patronage. The royal workshops at Isfahan produce carpets that combine traditional Persian design motifs with innovative techniques and materials, creating artistic works that are prized throughout Europe and Asia. The Safavid revival of Persian cultural traditions demonstrates Islam's ability to adapt to different linguistic and ethnic contexts. Persian poetry reaches new heights under Safavid patronage, while Persian miniature painting develops sophisticated techniques that influence artistic development throughout the Islamic world. The fusion of Shia religious themes with Persian cultural traditions creates art and literature that speaks to both spiritual and national aspirations. In India, the Mughal Empire under Akbar the Great represents perhaps the most ambitious attempt to create a genuinely multicultural Islamic state. Akbar's policy of Sulh-i-Kul, universal tolerance, extends equal protection to Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and other religious communities. This isn't just political pragmatism, it reflects a sophisticated understanding of how to govern diverse populations while maintaining Islamic legitimacy. The Mughal administrative system demonstrates remarkable innovation in managing cultural diversity. The Mansabdari system creates a merit-based hierarchy that incorporates talented individuals, regardless of their religious or ethnic background. Hindu Rajputs serve alongside Muslim nobles in the imperial administration, while Akbar's court becomes a center of intellectual exchange between different religious and philosophical traditions. Akbar's religious policy represents one of history's most ambitious attempts at interfaith dialogue and synthesis. His house of worship, Ibadat Khana, brings together scholars from Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and other traditions for regular debates and discussions. These sessions aren't merely academic exercises. They represent genuine attempts to find common ground between different religious traditions. The Din-i-Ilahi, Akbar's syncretic religious movement, demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations of religious synthesis. While the movement attracts a limited following and doesn't survive Akbar's death, it represents a serious attempt to create a universal religious framework that could unite India's diverse populations. The experiment shows both Akbar's intellectual ambition and his recognition of religion's political importance. Mughal artistic achievements represent successful synthesis of Islamic, Persian, and Indian traditions. The development of Mughal miniature painting creates new artistic styles that combine Persian composition techniques with Indian, naturalistic observation, and Islamic geometric principles. These artistic innovations influence both Islamic and Hindu artistic traditions and create new possibilities for cross-cultural artistic expression. Mughal architecture achieves its greatest triumph in the Taj Mahal. Built by Shah Jahan as a tomb for his wife Mumtaz Mahal, this building represents more than just architectural achievement. It symbolizes the cultural synthesis that makes Mughal civilization unique. Persian, Indian, and Islamic elements combine to create something entirely new, demonstrating the creative potential of cultural exchange under Islamic auspices. The technical innovations employed in Taj Mahal construction showcase Mughal engineering capabilities. The building's perfect proportions, innovative dome construction, and sophisticated decorative techniques require mastery of mathematics, engineering, and artistic design. The surrounding gardens and water features create an integrated environment that demonstrates Mughal understanding of landscape, architecture, and environmental design. But even as these three empires reach their zenith, they face new challenges that will ultimately transform their relationship with the wider world. European maritime expansion around Africa provides alternatives to traditional overland trade routes, reducing the commercial advantages that had long sustained Islamic prosperity. The discovery of American silver floods global markets, disrupting the monetary systems that had enabled Islamic commercial dominance. The Portuguese discovery of the sea route to India represents a fundamental challenge to Islamic commercial dominance. For centuries, Islamic societies had prospered by controlling the overland routes that connected European and Asian markets. The ability of European merchants to bypass these traditional routes by sailing around Africa threatens the economic foundations of Islamic prosperity. The influx of American silver creates inflationary pressures that Islamic economies struggle to manage. Traditional Islamic monetary systems, based on gold and silver coins with relatively stable values, prove inadequate for handling the massive increase in silver supply that results from American mining. The resulting price inflation undermines the economic stability that had supported Islamic political and military power. More ominously, European technological innovation begins outpacing Islamic achievements in crucial areas like firearms, navigation, and manufacturing. The printing press, initially rejected by Islamic societies as a threat to the tradition of handwritten scholarship, gives Europeans advantages in information dissemination and technical knowledge preservation. The Islamic resistance. The printing technology demonstrates the conservative tendencies that begin limiting Islamic adaptability during this period. While the prohibition on printing Arabic texts reflects legitimate concerns about maintaining textual accuracy and preserving traditional scholarship, it also prevents Islamic societies from gaining the advantages that printing provides for education, administration, and technical development. European advances in metallurgy and firearms production gradually erode Islamic military advantages. The superiority of European artillery becomes apparent in conflicts like the Ottoman siege of Vienna in 1683, where European defensive firepower proved superior to Ottoman offensive capabilities. Similarly, European naval artillery demonstrates increasing superiority over Islamic naval forces in conflicts throughout the Indian Ocean. The rise of European maritime empires also challenges Islamic expansion into new territories. Portuguese and Dutch control of Southeast Asian sea routes limits Islamic influence in the Spice Islands, while Spanish and Portuguese colonization of the Americas creates new sources of wealth that bypass Islamic territories entirely. These challenges force Islamic societies to reconsider their relationship with innovation and change. Traditional Islamic confidence in the superiority of their civilization begins giving way to recognition that adaptation and reform may be necessary for survival. Some Islamic intellectuals begin advocating for selective adoption of European innovations, while others argue for return to supposedly pure forms of Islamic practice. The Ottoman response to military challenges demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations of Islamic reform efforts. The establishment of new military schools, the recruitment of European military advisors, and the adoption of European military technologies show Ottoman willingness to adapt. However, these reforms often face resistance from traditional military and religious elites who view change as threatening to their interests and Islamic authenticity. Ottoman administrative reforms during this period attempt to modernize imperial governance while maintaining Islamic legitimacy. The development of new taxation systems, the standardization of administrative procedures, and the creation of new bureaucratic positions demonstrate Ottoman efforts to improve governmental efficiency. However, these reforms often create tensions between traditional and modern approaches to governance. The period also witnesses the emergence of new forms of Islamic revivalism that will influence modern Islamic thought. Scholars like Ahmad Sirhindi in India and Muhammad ibn Abbasid in Arabia argue that Islamic decline results from deviations from authentic Islamic practice rather than external pressures. Their calls for purification and reform represent early examples of the Islamic reform movements that will proliferate in later centuries. Ahmad Sirhindi's critique of Akbar's religious policies demonstrates the tension between Islamic universalism and Islamic orthodoxy. His arguments for returning to strict Islamic practice gain support among those who view Mughal tolerance as undermining Islamic identity. His influence contributes to the more restrictive religious policies adopted by later Mughal rulers. The Wahhabi movement in Arabia represents a more radical approach to Islamic reform. Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab's alliance with the Saudi family creates a political religious movement that seeks to purify Islamic practice by eliminating what they consider innovations and corruptions. This movement challenges both Ottoman authority and traditional Islamic practices, creating new tensions within the Islamic world. Despite these challenges, Islamic civilization continues to demonstrate remarkable cultural vitality throughout the early modern period. The Persian literary renaissance under Safavid patronage produces poets like Saib Tabrizi, whose works influence Persian literature for centuries. Ottoman literature develops new forms that blend traditional Islamic themes with contemporary concerns, while Mughal literature creates new syntheses of Persian, Arabic, and Indian traditions. Islamic scholarship continues to advance during this period, though often in different directions than contemporary European intellectual development. Islamic legal scholarship develops new approaches to contemporary problems, while Islamic theological scholarship addresses the challenges posed by religious diversity and political change. Islamic historical writing reaches new levels of sophistication under Ottoman and Mughal patronage. The continued vitality of Islamic commercial networks demonstrates the resilience of Islamic civilization despite European challenges. Islamic merchants adapt to new conditions by developing new trading relationships, adopting new technologies, and finding new markets. The persistence of Islamic commercial influence in regions like Southeast Asia and East Africa shows that European expansion doesn't immediately eliminate Islamic economic power. Islamic educational institutions continue to evolve during this period, adapting to new conditions while maintaining traditional functions. Madrasas incorporate new subjects and teaching methods while preserving their role as centers of Islamic learning. The Ottoman development of specialized schools for military, administrative, and technical training demonstrates Islamic willingness to adapt educational approaches to contemporary needs. By 1800 CE, the early modern transformation has fundamentally altered the position of Islamic civilization in world affairs. While Islamic empires remain powerful and culturally vibrant, they no longer enjoy the technological and commercial advantages that had sustained their expansion for over a millennium. The stage is set for the even more dramatic transformations of the modern era. The early modern period demonstrates both the achievements and limitations of Islamic civilizations. Response to changing global conditions. The remarkable cultural, architectural, and administrative achievements of the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires show that Islamic societies retain enormous creative potential. However, their difficulty in adapting to European technological and commercial innovations foreshadows the greater challenges that will characterize the modern period. The legacy of this period continues to influence contemporary Islamic societies. The institutional innovations developed by these empires, their approaches to governing diverse populations, and their synthesis of Islamic principles with practical governance requirements provide models that remain relevant today. Understanding this period is crucial for comprehending both the achievements of Islamic civilization and the challenges it faces in the modern world. As we reach the end of our journey through the vast sweep of Arabian and Islamic history, we find ourselves contemplating one of the most remarkable transformations in human civilization. From the harsh desert landscapes where nomadic tribes struggled for survival, emerged a religious and cultural force that would reshape 3 continents and influence the development of human knowledge, art, law, and society in ways that continue to resonate today. The story we've traced tonight is ultimately about adaptation and synthesis. Time and again, we've seen how Islamic civilization succeeded not by imposing rigid uniformity, but by demonstrating remarkable flexibility and incorporating diverse peoples, traditions, and innovations. The same adaptive genius that enabled Arabian tribes to thrive in desert environments later enabled Islamic societies to flourish in settings as different as Spanish cities, Central Asian steppes, Indian river valleys, and Southeast Asian islands. This adaptability stemmed from core principles established in those early desert communities, principles of equality before God, mutual obligation within the community, and respect for knowledge regardless of its source. These weren't just abstract ideals. They were practical necessities for survival in challenging environments that required cooperation across tribal and ethnic lines. The genius of early Islamic society lay in its ability to transform local Arabian customs into universal principles that could appeal to people from vastly different backgrounds. The concept of the Ummah, or community of believers, transcended the tribal loyalties that had previously defined Arabian society. This wasn't merely a religious innovation, it was a social revolution that created new possibilities for human organization and cooperation. Consider how revolutionary the early Islamic emphasis on meritocracy must have seemed to contemporaries. In societies where birth determined destiny, where slaves could never hope for freedom and foreigners remained perpetual outsiders, Islam proclaimed that a freed Ethiopian slave could become a muezzin calling believers to prayer, that a Persian convert could serve as a trusted advisor to the caliph, and that knowledge and piety mattered more than genealogy and wealth. This principle of merit-based advancement created a dynamic energy within Islamic societies that their competitors often lacked. While Byzantine and Persian empires struggled with rigid social hierarchies that wasted human talent, Islamic societies could draw upon the abilities of their entire populations. The result was an explosion of creativity and innovation that propelled Islamic civilization to remarkable achievements in every field of human endeavor. The early Islamic emphasis on literacy and learning also created cascading effects that influenced global development for centuries. The Quranic injunction to read wasn't just a religious commandment. It was a social program that promoted education as a religious obligation. The result was probably the most literate society in the medieval world, with implications that extended far beyond religious observance. This commitment to learning created the intellectual infrastructure that enabled Islamic societies to preserve, synthesize, and expand upon the knowledge of previous civilizations. When European learning declined during the early medieval period, Islamic scholars maintained libraries, supported research, and continued the scientific and philosophical investigations that had begun in ancient Greece, Persia, and India. The intellectual achievements we've explored, from the preservation and expansion of classical knowledge in Baghdad's House of Wisdom to the astronomical observations of Islamic Spain to the architectural innovations of Ottoman Turkey, all reflected this fundamental openness to learning and innovation. Islamic civilization became great not by rejecting foreign influences, but by synthesizing them into something new and distinctive. The translation movement of the Abbasid period represents one of history's most remarkable examples of systematic knowledge transfer. This wasn't simply a matter of converting texts from one language to another. It was a comprehensive effort to understand, evaluate, and improve upon the intellectual achievements of previous civilizations. Islamic scholars didn't just translate Aristotle. They critiqued his arguments, tested his conclusions, and developed new philosophical and scientific approaches that built upon his foundations. This process of intellectual synthesis created entirely new fields of knowledge. Algebra emerged from the interaction between Indian numerical systems, Greek geometric principles, and Islamic commercial requirements. Islamic medicine combined Greek anatomical knowledge with Persian pharmaceutical traditions and Islamic clinical observation to create medical practices that remained authoritative for centuries. The Abbasid translation movement also established methodological principles that influenced scholarly work throughout the Islamic world. The emphasis on accurate translation, careful documentation of sources, and systematic comparison of different authorities created scholarly standards that promoted rigorous intellectual investigation. These methods enabled Islamic scholars to make original contributions rather than simply preserving existing knowledge. Perhaps most importantly, the Islamic approach to knowledge synthesis demonstrated that intellectual progress could result from cultural exchange rather than cultural isolation. Instead of viewing foreign ideas as threats to Islamic authenticity, leading Islamic thinkers treated them as resources for understanding God's creation more completely. This attitude enabled Islamic civilization to remain intellectually dynamic even as it expanded across vast geographical areas with diverse cultural traditions. The economic networks that connected medieval Islamic societies created the world's first truly global economy, enabling the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across distances that wouldn't be surpassed until modern times. The commercial law, banking systems, and trading practices developed by Islamic merchants provided foundations for international commerce that influenced economic development worldwide. The Islamic commercial revolution extended far beyond the famous trade routes that connected Asia, Africa, and Europe. Islamic merchants developed sophisticated financial instruments that enabled complex international transactions. Letters of credit, partnership agreements, and insurance contracts created a legal framework for commerce that reduced risks and transaction costs across vast distances. the Islamic emphasis on contractual reliability and standardized weights and measures facilitated trade between societies that had previously found commercial exchange difficult or impossible. A merchant in Damascus could enter into binding agreements with partners in Delhi, confident that Islamic commercial law would provide recourse if disputes arose. This legal predictability encouraged long-distance trade and enabled the specialization that created wealth throughout the Islamic world. Islamic banking innovations provided alternatives to the interest-based lending that days religious law prohibited. Profit-sharing partnerships, cost-plus financing, and lease purchase agreements created financial instruments that enabled commercial expansion while conforming to Islamic ethical principles. These innovations influenced commercial practices throughout the medieval world and continued to provide models for contemporary Islamic finance. The integration of diverse regional economies under Islamic rule created opportunities for technological transfer and innovation. Agricultural techniques developed in one region could be adapted to similar climates elsewhere. Manufacturing processes perfected in one city could be established in distant locations where raw materials were available. The result was a level of technological diffusion that accelerated economic development throughout the Islamic world. The Islamic commercial network also facilitated the exchange of crops and agricultural techniques that transformed regional economies. The introduction of new crops like citrus fruits, rice, and cotton enabled agricultural diversification that increased productivity and supported larger populations. Islamic agricultural manuals preserved and transmitted farming techniques that enabled cultivation in marginal environments. The architectural achievements of Islamic civilization represent more than mere aesthetic accomplishment. They demonstrate the technical sophistication and cultural confidence of societies at the height of their power. From the geometric perfection of the Dome of the Rock to the soaring spaces of Ottoman mosques to the delicate beauty of Andalusi palaces, Islamic architecture created new possibilities for human artistic expression. Islamic architectural innovation often resulted from practical requirements rather than purely aesthetic considerations. The need to accommodate large congregations for Friday prayers led to the development of new structural techniques that enabled the construction of vast interior spaces. The desire to create cool, comfortable environments in hot climates prompted innovations in ventilation, water circulation, and thermal mass that influenced building design throughout the Middle East and North Africa. The Islamic approach to architectural decoration created entirely new artistic vocabularies that influenced global artistic development. The restriction on representational imagery in religious contexts prompted the development of geometric and calligraphic decoration that achieved remarkable sophistication and beauty. These decorative traditions influenced artistic development from Spain to Central Asia and continue to inspire contemporary artists and designers. Islamic gardens represented another form of artistic achievement that combined aesthetic beauty with practical functionality. The Persian garden tradition, with its emphasis on water, shade, and geometric organization, created outdoor spaces that provided relief from harsh climates while symbolizing spiritual themes. These garden designs influenced landscape architecture throughout Europe and Asia and continued to provide models for contemporary garden design. The Islamic tradition of manuscript illumination created some of history's most beautiful books. The combination of calligraphy, geometric decoration, and miniature painting produced artistic works that preserved and transmitted literary, scientific, and religious knowledge while achieving remarkable aesthetic beauty. These manuscript traditions influenced book design throughout the medieval world and established artistic techniques that continued to develop for centuries. Islamic textile traditions also achieved remarkable sophistication, developing weaving techniques, dyeing processes, and decorative patterns that influenced global textile production. Islamic carpets, silks, and cottons were prized throughout Europe and Asia for their technical quality and artistic beauty. The international demand for Islamic textiles created important export industries that contributed to the prosperity of Islamic societies. Perhaps most remarkably, this vast civilization maintained cultural and spiritual unity despite political fragmentation. The pilgrimage to Mecca continued to bring together Muslims from every corner of the known world, while the Arabic language served as a medium for scholarly and commercial communication across vast distances. Sufi mysticism provided spiritual connections that transcended political boundaries, while Islamic law offered common standards for personal and community life. The scientific achievements of Islamic civilization represent systematic advances in human understanding of natural phenomena. Islamic astronomers didn't simply preserve Greek astronomical knowledge, they corrected its errors, improved its accuracy, and developed new theoretical frameworks that advanced astronomical science. The astronomical tables prepared by Islamic scholars remain the most accurate available until the early modern period. Islamic mathematical innovations provided foundations for later European scientific development. The introduction of Arabic numerals and decimal notation revolutionized mathematical calculation and enabled advances in fields ranging from engineering to commerce. Islamic mathematicians developed trigonometry as a distinct discipline, created new geometric techniques, and advanced algebraic theory in ways that influenced mathematical development for centuries. Islamic medical achievements represented systematic advances in understanding human anatomy, disease processes, and therapeutic techniques. Islamic physicians conducted the first systematic clinical observations, developed new surgical procedures, and created comprehensive medical encyclopedias that preserved and transmitted medical knowledge. Islamic hospitals established new standards for medical care and medical education that influenced healthcare development throughout Europe and Asia. The Islamic approach to natural philosophy established methodological principles that contributed to the development of modern scientific method. The emphasis on empirical observation, systematic experimentation, and logical analysis created intellectual frameworks that enabled genuine advances in understanding natural phenomena. Islamic scholars like Ibn al-Haytham established experimental procedures that influenced scientific investigation for centuries. Islamic philosophical achievements provided sophisticated frameworks for understanding the relationship between reason and revelation, individual and society, and human and divine. Islamic philosophers didn't simply preserve Greek philosophical traditions. They developed new approaches to fundamental questions about knowledge, existence, and ethics. Their works influenced both Islamic and European intellectual development and continue to provide insights into perennial philosophical problems. The challenges faced by Islamic societies, from Mongol invasions to Crusader attacks to European technological competition, tested this civilization's resilience and adaptability. Sometimes Islamic societies met these challenges successfully, demonstrating remarkable capacity for military innovation and political reorganization. Sometimes they struggled to adapt quickly enough, leading to political fragmentation or economic decline. The Islamic legal tradition represents one of history's most sophisticated attempts to create comprehensive frameworks for human social organization. Islamic law addressed everything from personal hygiene to international relations, providing detailed guidance for individual behavior while establishing principles for community organization. The development of different schools of Islamic jurisprudence created flexibility within a unified legal framework that enabled adaptation to diverse social conditions. Islamic educational institutions established new models for advanced learning that influenced educational development worldwide. The madrasa system created networks of schools that provided standardized education while allowing for regional variation and specialization. These institutions trained not only religious scholars, but also administrators, judges, and teachers who served throughout the Islamic world. The Islamic approach to religious diversity established principles of tolerance and accommodation that were remarkable for their time. The dhimmi system, despite its limitations, provided protected status for religious minorities that often offered greater security than they had experienced under previous rulers. Islamic societies generally avoided the religious persecution that characterized many contemporary civilizations. Islamic social institutions developed sophisticated approaches to charity, public welfare, and community service. The zakat system established obligatory charitable giving as a religious duty, while Waqf foundations created endowments that supported education, healthcare, and social services. These institutions provided social safety nets that helped maintain community cohesion and supported the vulnerable members of society. The Islamic tradition of consultation and consensus building, embodied in concepts like shura and ijma, established principles of participatory governance that influenced political development throughout the Islamic world. While these principles didn't always prevent authoritarian rule, they provided theoretical frameworks for legitimate governance that emphasized consultation, justice, and community welfare. But throughout these cycles of expansion and contraction, cultural fluorescence and political crisis, certain core elements of Islamic civilization persisted. The commitment to learning and scholarship never disappeared entirely, even during periods of political chaos. The ideal of social justice continued to inspire reform movements and revolutionary changes. The vision of human unity under divine guidance remained a powerful force for social and political organization. The influence of Islamic civilization on global development extends far beyond the Islamic world itself. European recovery of Greek philosophical and scientific texts through Islamic sources played a crucial role in the European Renaissance and scientific revolution. Islamic commercial practices influenced the development of international trade and banking systems. Islamic artistic traditions influenced architectural and decorative arts throughout Europe and Asia. The three great early modern empires, Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal, represented the culmination of over a millennium of Islamic political and cultural development. Each demonstrated different possibilities for organizing Islamic society, from the Ottomans' multi-ethnic empire to the Safavids' Persian Shia state to the Mughals' multicultural synthesis. Their achievements in architecture, literature, administration, and military organization rivaled those of any contemporary civilization. Yet by 1800 CE, these same empires faced challenges that would force fundamental transformations in Islamic society: European technological and military superiority, new patterns of global trade, and internal pressures for reform. All demanded responses that would reshape Islamic civilization once again. The story of the desert kingdoms of Arabia and their Islamic successors reminds us that civilizations are not static entities, but dynamic processes of adaptation and change. The capacity for renewal and transformation that enabled Islamic societies to spread from small Arabian trading cities to vast multi-continental empires remains relevant today as contemporary Islamic societies grapple with globalization, technological change, and cultural diversity. The legacy of those early desert communities extends far beyond the Islamic world itself. Their preservation and expansion of classical knowledge helped lay foundations for European Renaissance and scientific revolution. Their commercial innovations influenced global economic development. Their artistic and architectural achievements continue to inspire creative expression worldwide. Most fundamentally, the history of Islamic civilization demonstrates humanity's capacity for creating inclusive, dynamic societies that can unite diverse peoples around shared values while respecting their distinctive traditions. In our contemporary world, struggling with questions of cultural diversity, global cooperation, and social justice, the example of Islamic civilization at its best offers valuable insights into the possibilities and challenges of building inclusive communities. The story that began in the harsh deserts of Arabia with scattered tribes seeking water and survival ultimately becomes a testament to the transformative power of ideas, the importance of adaptation and learning, and the human capacity for creating civilizations that can endure across centuries while continuing to evolve and grow. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you'll dream of caravans crossing endless dunes, scholars debating in Baghdad's halls of learning, architects creating impossible geometries in stone, and poets finding beauty in the interplay of human longing and divine mystery. The desert kingdoms may have been transformed by history, but their legacy continues to shape our world in ways both seen and unseen, reminding us that even the most unlikely beginnings can give rise to achievements that echo through the ages. The expansion from those early Arabian communities to a civilization spanning 3 continents and influencing global development demonstrates that human societies possess remarkable capacities for growth, adaptation, and creative synthesis. The principles of equality, learning, and justice that emerged from the harsh realities of desert life proved capable of inspiring and organizing some of history's most sophisticated and successful societies. This legacy reminds us that the challenges facing contemporary societies, whether questions of economic inequality, cultural diversity, environmental sustainability, or global cooperation, are not unprecedented. Human societies have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to develop new institutions, technologies, and social arrangements that address emerging challenges while preserving valuable traditions. The story of Islamic civilization also demonstrates that cultural achievement and political power need not be permanently linked. Even when Islamic societies lost their political dominance, their cultural and intellectual contributions continue to influence global development. This suggests that the ultimate measure of a civilization's success lies not in its military conquests or territorial extent, but in its contributions to human knowledge, artistic expression, and social organization. The transformation of Arabian desert tribes into a global civilization represents one of history's most remarkable examples of human adaptability and creativity. It reminds us that societies can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges through innovation, cooperation, and commitment to shared values. As we face our own contemporary challenges, the example of Islamic civilization provides both inspiration and practical insights into the possibilities for human social organization and cultural achievement. The echoes of those early desert kingdoms continue to resonate in our contemporary world, reminding us that the capacity for transformation, learning, and creative synthesis remains as relevant today as it was 13 centuries ago in the markets of Mecca, the halls of Baghdad, and the courts of Cordoba, Istanbul, and Delhi.